most of us in this room just came back from something that we call the ordinance of foot washing. And some of us, it has just become, because we've done it so often, once a quarter for so many years, that it just becomes something that's done. I'd like to just push the pause button a minute. And we're going to take a look at that in just a minute. The title of my thought today is called Humbled to Serve. God has put a lot of very unique things together. Yes? When we look at nature, there are some very unique animals that get along that you would think, oh no, that definitely would not happen. Anybody know what this is? To see an enemy. They're really cool if you go down to the beach and you stick your finger in the middle of them and watch them close your finger, right? And then they realize it's not edible and then they open back up. Yeah, it's kind of fun to take the little kids down there. They come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and colors. Absolutely a beautiful creature. I did say creature, it's not a plant. It's actually an invertebrate. And those little tentacles usually are used to sting other fish so that the fish die and then they can eat them. Now, obviously, it doesn't really have an effect on us when we put it because it's not meant to affect us. But the other fish, it definitely does. You know, this little guy is a clownfish. Some of you automatically thought of another name for him, but we won't go there today. This is a clownfish. And clownfish are beautiful fish that actually choose to live inside sea anemones. Figure that out. Why did God do that? God gave a special coating to this fish so that he would live inside this sea creature that eats fishes. Does that make any sense? But God took the good abilities of one creature and the good abilities of another creature, and he put them together in this symbiotic relationship that helps them each survive. You see, when the little fish are inside the sea anemones, they move the water around and they keep things flowing, which helps the health of the anemone. It also eats the parasites off the anemone that kills the anemone. So the anemone says, yeah, come hang out with me. I'm okay with you. Now, the good part about it for the clownfish is eating for bigger fish. But the bigger fish don't like sea anemones because they know they're going to get stung if they go in there. So the clownfish live down inside the sea anemones and are protected from the bigger fish that want to gobble them up. These two seeming like very different creatures God made to work together in the sea. Now, God just didn't do it when he created ocean animals. He actually did it when he came to this earth as our Savior, right? Think about the disciples that he called, right? Think about the variety of backgrounds and the differences that they had. If you look at them, most of them were fishermen. Yes? Most of them were uneducated, rough seamen that were out there, creating a life by fishing every day. Which means they got home after work, probably smelt like fish, right? They had to mend their nets. They had to be out there in the hot sun if they were fishing by day. If they were fishing by night, they'd have to sleep during the day. It was a rough life for them. Yes? God said, come, I'll make you fishers of men. But they weren't all all fishermen, right? There was a man by the name of Matthew, otherwise known as Levi. He was a publican, which means he worked for the Roman government. Oh, no. He didn't choose somebody that worked for the Roman government to come and be part of his inner circle. You see, Jesus didn't look on the outward appearance. He didn't see the smelliness of the fishermen. He didn't see the job of Matthew. Jesus saw the heart of the disciples. He chose zealots that probably hated Matthew because he was a publican. He worked for the enemy, right? I'm sure that there was all kinds of conflict among those 12 men that he chose. All kinds of things that would rear its head. But somehow God chose 12 men and brought them into his inner circle from all the different backgrounds, all the different personalities. Some of them were brilliant scholars in the Jewish law. Some of them really all they knew was how to fish. It was just all kinds of people that he pulled together. 12 special ones. And he said, come. 2 of them were called the sons of thunder. Can you imagine having that as your nickname? The son of thunder. Well, one day, the sons of thunder were with Jesus. And this was toward the end of his ministry. This was toward the end, just days before he would be crucified. And the sons of thunder, in the book of Matthew, chapter 20, it actually says his mother asked. In Mark says they asked themselves, hey, Jesus, whatever I ask you, will you do? Now, right away, that's a pretty presumptuous question to ask Jesus, isn't it? Yeah? Whatever I ask you, will you do? Have you ever had your parents say, if I ask you something, will you say yes? And the wise parent says, that all depends on what you ask me, right? So Jesus says, what is it you're wanting so badly? What did they want? I want to be, well, let's read it. Well, let's open our Bibles first to the book of Mark, chapter 10. Book of Mark, chapter 10. Those of you who have your electronic version may get there faster than the rest of us that are still using the analog version. But if you go to Mark, chapter 10. Sorry. There we go. Mark chapter 10. And if we start at verse 35 for just a second, we'll get to what's on the screen in a minute. But it says, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him saying, Teacher, what we want you to do for us, or we want you to do for us whatever we ask. And he said to them, what do you want me to do for you? They said to him, grant us that we may sit one on your right hand and the other on your left in your glory. Wow. Now they've been hanging out with these 12 other men, yes, or including them, with Jesus for 3 years now. For 3 years. And they have the guts to call Jesus aside and say, look it, we want to be your number one and number two man. Just us, you know. I know you have your 12, but we want right hand and left hand when you come in your glory. Wow. That's a gutsy move on these two guys, isn't it? Jesus wisely gives them an answer. That answer is on the screen, but Jesus called to them, or he basically said, hey, well, this is what's up. And Jesus called them to himself and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant. Shall be your servant. That's kind of like turning the apple cart upside down somehow. You know, it's wait a minute. The world said, if I'm on your right and I'm on your left, I'm somebody. And he's saying, you're somebody when you're a servant to everybody. Now, I want you to imagine going to dinner with all the rest of the 12 now, after you call Jesus aside, and they all find out what you asked Jesus. What do you think's going through the minds of these 12 men? Man, those two. Watch out for them, man. You know what they just did? They just asked Jesus to make them number one and number two. What kind of guts? Who do they think they are? Can you imagine the tension going into that meal in that upper room amongst the disciples? Yes, they've seen a few other things. They've listened to a few other parables, but it's only been a short time when they find themselves in the upper room, sitting around a table, all eyeing on each other. Now they're thinking, who's really going to be first? Yeah? Now they're thinking, well, it really should be me, you know. I'm the best fisherman out of the group. Or, you know, I know more about finances than anybody else. Or, you know, I happen to really know the Hebrew law and better than anybody else. Can you imagine the thoughts going through their minds as they look at each other? However, Jesus finds a way to settle everything down. You see, when they got to the upper room, there was separation. There was division. There was some ill feelings. There was, I'm not sure about the guy sitting next to me. But Jesus said, let's eat together. Shall we? Let's have a meal together. We have a pastor that has told us often, right? A family that eats together, a family that cries together, a family that prays together, a family that sings together. We stay together, right? Jesus knew that. He says, let's go eat together. And when he got up there, he realized these 12 men, if they are really going to change the world for his kingdom, they had to get together. They had to work as one. This business of who's the greatest was not going to cut it. There's no way. So he said, how am I going to change this? It's very simple. He changed it with his actions. What did he do? He got up, took his outer robe off, grabbed a towel, put it around his waist, grabbed the basin that the slave was supposed to have been there to use but wasn't, and some water, and he went and knelt down in front of each of his disciples and started washing their feet. That was the job for the slave. That was the job for the servant of the house. Now, there didn't happen to be one there. And Spirit of Prophecy tells us they were all looking at each other saying, who's going to do this? Jesus didn't look at anybody else to do it. He stood up, grabbed the basin, grabbed the water, grabbed the towel, and started washing their feet. When he brought them together for a meal. But more than that, he brought them together so that they could be humbled together. He knew that they all needed to realize that their ideas, their thought processes were not as important as his. He told them earlier, if you want to be the greatest, become the servant of all. Serve. Find a way to help somebody else. Find a way to show God's love to somebody else. He did it by washing feet. And as the disciples got their feet washed, we know the story. He went through, he got to Peter, and Peter says, not my feet. Until he hears Christ say, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part in me. Well, in that case, do it all. No. You had a bath this morning. Yeah? You don't need to be washed. Your feet need to be cleaned. What was he really saying? How many of you like people touching your feet? I don't like people touching my feet. Yeah? But he's saying, you need to humble yourself before me. You need to take my example and humble your hearts and become a servant to all. My hat goes off to so many who come every single time there is community service to be able to give away food. My hat goes off to all of you that came so faithfully every single night during the reaping campaign to be able to serve those that came as visitors. You know, Jesus washed the feet of the disciples so that he could humble the disciples into service. Because he knew when he was gone, they were going to have to work together and have each other's back. They were about to go through the worst time of their life when they crucified Jesus, and they all scatter because they don't want to be associated with him. And so as he realizes this is going to happen, let's humble ourselves before Christ. Then when all this happens, you're going to come back together as a team, as one, to serve the Lord. I hope that as we have washed each other's feet today, that we have had the feeling that Jesus has washed our feet, that Jesus has humbled us, that Jesus has given us the command. Go serve. Become the greatest in my kingdom. Serve each other. Serve the church. Serve the community. Serve God's kingdom. This service is meant to reconnect us with Christ in a very special way. And the way he connected with the disciples is what we just did, was washing feet. There's many different personalities, many different thought processes in this building, but we all need to be one in Jesus Christ. Servants of the Most High God. So that we can represent his love that we are about to celebrate with those that don't know it yet. That's our responsibility. I pray that Christ has washed your feet this morning. And as we partake in the emblems that we are about ready to partake in a few minutes, that he will touch your hearts to be able to be humbled before him and to be used by him.